Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly, and I'm a program coordinator with Burlington Green Environmental Association. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for a special event, The Wonderful World of Warblers, with Bob Bell, our special guest speaker. Both Burlington Green and Bob are members of the bird-friendly Hamilton Burlington team, and this event is part of our celebration of World Migratory Bird Day, which is this weekend on May 14th. So tonight's event is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out after. Before I get started, I'd like to take a moment for a land acknowledgement. And this land acknowledgement relates to where Burlington Green does its work in Burlington, Ontario. If you're joining us from somewhere else, we encourage you to do your own land acknowledgement where you are. As stewards of the earth, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We honor all the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people who've been living on the land since time immemorial, and we recognize their leadership in protecting and caring for Mother Earth. In Burlington, our work with the community takes place within the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, represented by Treaty 14 and 19, and on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Attawandaron, Haudenosaunee, and Métis peoples. We honor these rightful caretakers of this sacred land surrounding the Great Lakes, and we are grateful for their teachings. We are each encouraged to continually learn from and about the Indigenous community where we live and how we can meaningfully honor the calls to action for truth and reconciliation. We've got a decent sized group tonight, so you'll see that your cameras and microphones have been disabled. If you have any questions for Bob throughout the presentation, feel free to drop those in the Q&A at the bottom. We are going to have a couple minutes for questions at the end. Feel free to use the chat to say hello, interact with one another, but it is really important, if you have a question, be sure to put it in the Q&A, otherwise it might get missed. Bob has joined us and shared his passion for birding a few times now, and we're so excited to have him back again. If you missed his prior talks about birding or owling, we do have recordings available on our Burlington Green YouTube channel. But for those who haven't met Bob, I'll give a brief introduction. Bob Bell spent 35 years as the mineral exploration geologist before retiring to Ancaster in 2015. He quickly discovered that birding was a great hobby for taking his mind off his aches and pains caused by chronic Lyme disease, and has subsequently become an avid birder. He is the author of a book titled Out of the Limelight and Into the Sunlight: Birding as Therapy for the Chronically Ill, which is due to be published later this year. Bob is passionate about sharing the joy of birding with people of all skill levels and enjoys introducing them to a huge variety of beautiful birds that can be seen in the Burlington and Hamilton area. He hopes that his passion will inspire viewers to take a new or increased interest in the sights and sounds of nature that surround us, and that this interest will translate into support for efforts to have Burlington and Hamilton achieve the next level of certification as bird-friendly cities by Nature Canada. You can also follow Bob's birding adventures under his Twitter profile at The Birder Bob. So I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to Bob now. So Bob, you are free to unmute yourself and share your screen, and we'll just give him a moment to get all set up.
Okay, can you hear me now, or am I muted?
You sound great.
Okay, so just bear with me.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay, yes. And slideshow. Oops. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. So thank you, Kelly, for that kind introduction, and welcome everybody. And thank you for your interest in birds, and in particular warblers, my all-time favorite class of birds. This beautiful piece of art was done by a very good friend of mine, Paul Riss, who lives here in Hamilton. Paul is not only an excellent birder, he's an extremely talented designer and artist. He's a Canadian rep that sits on the board for the American Birding Association. And he was featured on a CBC documentary, Rare Bird Alert. So Paul's kind of a big thing in the birding community here. And Paul, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to use this piece of art. So here's some shots that will hopefully get you as excited about warblers as I am. You can just see they're colorful, they're beautiful, they're singing away. So I thought before I forgot, I should mention a couple of things. The photos were all taken by me, unless I indicate otherwise, and that almost all of the photos are of males. And that's for two reasons. One, the males are the ones that are sitting up high and singing, while the females are often skulking and hiding down low. And then secondly, so you don't see the females that often. And when you do, they're very bland in comparison to the males. So that you know, they're just not that flashy. I will show you a few females for comparison. So, you know, what is a warbler for those that don't know? You know, as I say, it's my favorite, but the warblers are favorite of many, many birders. They're only found in the Americas. The full name is wood warblers. But there is a family called wood warblers in Eurasia, but they're not related. Our wood warblers are unique to North and South America. They're insect eaters, so you're not going to see them at your feeders, with a couple of very minor exceptions. You might get a pine warbler come and eat some suet. I kind of tagged this just, I want to segue for a second about feeders. In case you're not all aware, there's a really bad avian flu sweeping across North America right now. It's really decimating, in particular, poultry and waterfowl. But in addition, I've seen pictures of raptors being killed, and I assume that's because they're at the apex predators. It's mixed messaging about leaving feeders out. Birds Canada has advised that it's okay at this point to leave your feeders out, but you need to really monitor carefully, looking for sick birds, and you need to sterilize with bleach your feeders every few days. So, okay, getting back to warblers, they're hyperactive. They're very good at hiding. I mean, it's amazing how brilliantly colored these are, and yet they're hard to spot. And they are tiny. The most are less than 6 inches and weigh less than an ounce. And just to show you a comparison, these photos are not mine. The species I've chosen for this is the black-throated blue warbler. Here's the female sitting on her nest, and here's the male feeding his young and the eggs. And you can see the dimensions here comparing black-throated blue to a chickadee. It's a little bit shorter in length and it weighs a little bit less. So you can just imagine how tiny those eggs are and how tiny that nest is. These are small little birds. We have about 110 species in total in the Americas. About half of those we never see. They're full-time residents of the tropics. The other half migrate north into North America, but they retreat in the winter to the subtropics or the tropics. And of those, about 33 species will come and breed here in Ontario. So, you know, one question, Kelly and I thought it'd be kind of fun to get people to vote and see what you think. Are these tropical birds that come up here to visit us, or are they our birds that go for a winter vacation and down south? And so I'd be very interested to hear what the audience thinks.
So I've just launched the poll. If everyone wants to vote, we'll give you a couple seconds.
I think I'm seeing a pride in ownership here.
We'll give just a few more seconds. Almost everyone has voted. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll.
Okay, so 73% think they're ours. And I'm going to keep you in suspense till near the end when we talk about migration, and then we'll talk about this. So Kelly, do I need to close this off my screen to remove the poll?
Yeah, you can just exit out.
Okay. All right, thank you everybody for participating in that. So going on with what is a warbler, you might have noticed that yellow is often a dominant color on many species. And it's often accentuated with patches or stripes of black and white, and in some cases, chestnut striping. But not all warblers have yellow. They may be orange or blue or greenish or even almost like a caramel toffee color and black and white. A couple of the identification challenges you might run into, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but one is, the varying degrees of sexual dimorphism, and that's just a fancy way of saying the difference between the males and the females of the same species. And there are some species where there's no difference, but there's some. But in most of them, the female is much more toned down and muted. So the example I'm showing is one of my absolute favorite warblers, the Blackburnian. Here's the male up here and the female down here. So you can see his crisp blacks are dulled down gray, and his flaming orange throat is a dullish yellow orange. But when you look in detail, he's got this triangular eye patch. Well, she's got the same marking. It's there, but it's just much more subtle. So that's one problem, but you don't really need to worry about that because you hardly ever see the females anyway. The bigger challenge is identifying them in the spring in their breeding plumage versus in the fall when they're in their non-breeding plumage. As one birding pundit said, I just love this quote, in the spring, they're dressed to kill. In the fall, they're dressed to chill. So the males get all fancied up in the spring, to attract a mate and get good territory and make lots of babies. But in the fall, most of them molt into a duller plumage, often ending up looking similar to the females. But not all. There are some that don't molt at all. They have the same plumage year round, but the vast majority do this. And then the other confusion in the fall is now you've got the males that kind of look like mom, but you've also got all the babies. And the babies tend to look like mom, whether they are a male baby or a female baby. So there is sort of a term confusing fall warblers. And my example here is a magnolia warbler in the spring and in the fall. The ultimate confusion for confusing fall warblers are the bay-breasted warbler and the blackpoll warbler. Here's the spring birds. You would never mix these up. They're clearly very, very different. But in the fall, look at them. They both molt into something that is virtually identical. Very hard to tell them apart. And the key trick, the field ID, is the blackpoll warbler has bright orange yellow feet year round. So you see the bay breast has got black feet here, and over here, bright orange. Kelly had asked me, how long do these warblers live? Well, this really applies to all songbirds. Most songbirds live less than 1 year. And if they do make it through to their first breeding season, they then have a 50% chance every year thereafter of making it to the next year. And if those of you know how to calculate the math on odds of 50-50, it comes out that only one songbird in about 1,000 is going to live to 10 years. So, typically the lifespan could be 2, 3, up to 8 years, say, but it's a tough life. And this allows me a great segue to get into the fact that we need to do all we can to help protect these birds because it's such a challenging life. And the number one thing any of you can do is keep your cat indoors. That's the worst thing that humans do to birds in the world. Roaming cats, pet cats that are allowed to roam, and feral cats kill over 1 billion birds annually in North America. And on top of that, over 1 billion more small mammals, chipmunks, mice, squirrels. So if you really want to help birds, keep your cat indoor. It's going to have a much healthier, longer life as well. And then the other thing we're going to talk about for the migration portion is lights out, and we'll come back to that. So I'm about to go through a bunch of different warblers, and I would ask you to kind of keep a note to yourself of which one is your favorite, because I'd be very curious at the end. Kelly will conduct another poll, and we'll see if there's any kind of consensus or if we get 30 different answers. So the way I split them up into 3 categories. One is what I consider common summer residents, and then I'll do uncommon summer residents, and then I'll do the ones that are basically boreal birds that we only see for a short window now and in the fall while they're migrating through. So the first common one I want to start with is the yellow warbler, a very good name, bright yellow. They're very common in areas with shrubby secondary growth, especially around waterways. For those of you that are familiar with the Hamilton area, You go around Coots Paradise, they're everywhere around Coots Paradise. The males have these orange tiger stripes. The females may have very faint ones to none. And they have a very black beady eye that really stands out against that bright yellow. They are incessant singers. And the mnemonic, it sounds like sweet, sweet, I'm so sweet. And then it cuts really short. Or some of my friends say sweet, sweet, shredded wheat. But it always seems to cut off really fast. And here's one, showing the habitat. He's on some reeds in a marsh, around the edge of a marsh. Our second common one is the American redstart. You might want to question why it's redstart, because the males are orange and the females are yellow. I've read that the name is derived from an old German word that means red tail, but I've also read that start is an old English word for tail. So, there certainly is some derivation of red tail somewhere in there. And they do utilize that tail. They'll flash it open really quickly to startle insects into popping up, and then they fly catch and get their lunch. In Cuba, they're called candelita, the little torch, which is a lovely little name. They're very common in the Dundas Valley. I saw my first ones this morning. They weren't there yesterday. They were there this morning. There's one trail off Martin Road here in Ancaster that my friends call Redstart Alley. Females are quite different looking. There's no orange, and the black is gray, just like our previous examples. One unique thing about redstarts is that the males don't achieve their daddy plumage until their second year. And so they may have some black dots like this on their chest, but if you see a bird that you think is a female redstart and it's singing, it's probably a young male that still hasn't molted into the adult plumage. I can't give you a mnemonic for their songs, because this is one warbler that has like a dozen songs. They're just a whole jumble of different songs. The next up is our common yellowthroat. I call them the little El Bandido, the masked Lone Ranger, though the females lack the mask. They like marshy, wet areas. They'll be skulking low around in the weeds, but the males will get up high and sing. And when they do, what you hear is witchety, witchety, witchety. Very, very distinctive. Next up is a blue-winged warbler, and this is another one that wasn't here yesterday, and it's here today. So they came in over last night, now that we're getting southerly winds. Bright lemon yellow with that black eye stripe and accentuated with lovely blue-gray wings. Like all insect-eating birds, it's got a very pointy tip. Not like a sparrow or a seed-eating bird that has a much thicker bill. They have a very buzzy song. It sounds like an insect. Bzz, bzz. And I took this shot this morning right here in the Dundas Valley. So this is hot off the press. This guy was flying all night, and today he was laying out territory, staking his claim to the territory. And then finally, and the really common ones is the the pine warbler. I put here best named warbler, and that's because when they're on habitat, they're almost always in a pine tree or close to a pine tree. During migration, they could be anywhere, of course, but this is important because I'm going to come back later to some birds that have very inappropriate names. This is a good one. Pete Dunn is a famous author of many different bird guide books and just bird books in general. And I just love his description here. The plumage is roughed out and shabby, like a watercolor field sketch of a warbler that the artist never returned to. And you can see he does look a little bit shambolic, just a little bit disheveled. Their song is a very fast trill. And if you're familiar with the chipping sparrow, to my ear, they're very, very similar. These are one of our earliest returning migrants. These guys will show up here in Ancaster by April 20th. Here's a female. You can see how different she looks. And I took this in Hamilton last week. Now we go into the what I categorize as uncommon summer residents, but they're not all uncommon for the same reason. Some of them are uncommon just because they're here, but they're skulky, and you're just lucky if you see one. Some are uncommon because we're right on the northern edge of their range, or some we're right on the southern edge of their range, so that the main population is north or south of us. And then one or two of them are uncommon because their population is low and they're basically endangered or threatened. They have a very low overall population. So the first one is the mourning warbler. And he's so named for that mourning bib. It's sort of like funeral attire, that black bib. They like regenerating sort of secondary deciduous woodlands, the shrubs up to about 6 feet tall. I took this on the rail trail in Copetown at the Summit Bog. They're secretive and skulky. They forage very low. You know, here I put found around the Dundas Valley. I can think of half a dozen spots where you can hear them singing and making a family in the summers in Dundas. Next is the hooded warbler. Males have this really spectacular black hood that looks like a balaclava. But the females, you might say they lack the balaclava, but if you look very carefully, there it is, but it's very, very toned down gray. You can just barely see it. These are uncommon because we're on the northern limit. They're mostly south of the Great Lakes. But there's been quite a few seen around the Hamilton area this spring during migration. And I'm really lucky because there's several pairs breed about 2 miles from my house here in the Dundas Valley, but you hardly ever see them. They're very secretive. And their outer tail feathers are white and the yellow down the middle. And this allows them to also flash their tail really quickly, like the redstart, to startle insects. And then they catch them out of the air. Next up is the prothonotary warbler, and you might wonder what the heck, where that name comes from. They're shockingly almost neon yellow, beautiful bird. Well, they're named for the robes that were once worn by Roman Catholic papal clerks. And they're uncommon because, again, they're south of us. We're on the northern edge of their range, and they're very fussy about where they live. They breed in flooded out river bottom hardwoods or wetlands. And it's kind of cool because it does give you really unique opportunities to maybe get a picture of one reflecting on life, or, you know, mirror looking at themselves and admiring themselves. Americans call them the golden swamp warbler. They are our only warbler that is a cavity nester. So they'll utilize a nesting box. And Rondo Provincial Park down in Lake Erie is a really great place for them. And this is where I took this shot. One of our most beautiful warblers, in my opinion, is the golden winged warbler. They're uncommon because, and for the reverse reason, their main range is north of us. So we're lucky to get them here. There were 2 found in Ancaster last summer, and I'm proud to say I found one of them, but unfortunately he didn't stick around very long. He was here just a few days. Genetically, they're almost identical to the blue-winged warblers I already talked about. It's something like 99.99%. So they interbreed constantly. They hybridize. It results in 2 really beautiful hybrid birds. But this is putting real pressure on the golden wing population. It seems like the blue winged their population is increasing at the expense of the golden wing. And like the blue wing, they have a very buzzy song that sounds like bees, buzz, buzz, buzz. I'm not very good at imitating them, but you can look it up. Next up is in my opinion, breathtaking cerulean warbler. You know, cerulean is such a great word to describe these sky blue upper parts. And their range is south of us, so they're uncommon here. But also these guys, their population's been really, really declining. So I think there's only something like 500,000 in the world. And last summer, again, we were lucky. We had one right down the road from me in the Dundas Valley that hung around for a couple of weeks, and one in Hamilton. They're really hard to see because they're treetop specialists. They're always up in the canopy. My pictures were taken on spring migration where they're down low feeding, but typically once they're nesting, they're way up high. Here's a female. So again, she's slightly toned down from the male. Now, a very different looking warbler, to the point where, look at the name, northern water thrush, because it just doesn't look like the other warblers. They typically breed in the boreal forests, way north up through northern Ontario, over into Newfoundland and further west. But there is a couple of, I put them here because there are a couple of patches of almost boreal type forest in Flamborough, just about a half-hour drive north of Hamilton, and you can find them there. They prefer, their habitat is stagnant or slow-moving water, and this is why they're called water thrush. They like to look for worms and bugs in the muck. They have a very similar look-alike, which I'm going to skip just for time, but a Louisiana water thrush looks almost identical, but they prefer running water. And so they're in hilly valleys with streams, and there's some of them right here in the Dundas Valley, but they look virtually identical. Next uncommon one is the chestnut-sided warbler, and this is a great name. I got the first one right here at our pond this morning, so he came in overnight. These guys are uncommon because these are boreal forest breeders, but I know a spot, again, in the Dundas Valley. You can tell why I love where I live. The birding is so great in the Dundas Valley. There are a few that breed there, but typically you'd go up to northern Ontario to see them. Their song, the mnemonic, it sounds like, please, please, pleased to meet you. In the fall, their molt is so different. You'd hardly know it was the same bird. Sometimes you can still see a faint hint of the chestnut stripe, and this one is practically gone. But there's a case of confusing fall warblers because it doesn't look anything like the spring. And then lastly is the really adorable ovenbird. They get their name from their nest. They build a nest on the ground. It's a leaf-covered dome with a side entrance. So people thought it was like an old-fashioned outdoor Dutch oven, hence the name ovenbird. And they really are forest floor birds. They feed on the ground by walking. They don't even hop. They walk, and they nest on the ground. Their song is a dead giveaway. It's a loud, ringing song. And it always reminds me of back when I was in grade 3 and the teacher, you want to be the first one to answer the teacher, 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 and you're yelling louder and louder and louder. And that's what they sound like. Okay, so now this last batch are the ones that unfortunately we typically only see in this brief window, like right now, this week, and then again in the fall because they're going further north to breed. But as always, there are some exceptions. And the first two on my list here, the black and white and then the Canada, do breed in that same little patch of forest in Flamborough as the northern water thrush, but typically you'd go north for them. So the black and white, obviously like a little zebra. And here, I just said that already. They feed and behave almost like a nuthatch. I mean, this looks like a nuthatch pose hanging upside down. And that's because they actually probe the bark for insects. And so they've evolved an extra long hind toe and heavier legs, which help them brace themselves to move around on the trunk. So I'm gonna get a drink. Their song is a really squeaky, wheezy, wheezy, wheezy. It sounds like a rusty, squeaky wheel or a bartender with a wet rag rubbing a glass counter. Here's the female, just very similar pattern, but very toned down. Next up, my other favorite warbler, the Canada warbler, these beautiful necklace on them. They're named for their breeding range, which is basically confined to Canada from Nova Scotia right over into BC. And again, these are the exception. They like wet, almost swampy forests, real tangles, sort of forest you can't walk through. And here's a bonus shot just because I like them so much. Next is the Nashville warbler. And now we're about to embark on a list of birds with inappropriate names. So first ornithologist observed one in Nashville, Tennessee in 1811, but it was during migration. These guys don't live anywhere near Nashville. They go up to the boreal forest to breed, and then they go way south for the winter. I'm told they may breed locally according to the breeding atlas, but I'm not aware. I've never seen one in the summer here. The males have a tiny patch of sort of chestnut red on their cap. It's not always visible. I took this shot at Sedgwick Forest in Oakville, which is adjacent to a wastewater treatment plant. So there's warm water, there's insects hatching, and often the birds will stay later than they should because there's lots of food. But I just saw his colors really popped against the snow. Magnolia warbler. The stripes are different than the necklace on the Canada warbler. And again, here we go. First identified in magnolia trees in Mississippi. They don't live anywhere near magnolia trees. Probably a more appropriate name would have been spruce warbler, because that's where they breed in northern Ontario or central Ontario. And since we'll be talking about migration later, I thought I'd just show you one example of a range map. And so for the magnolia warbler, this is where they breed. The color density is really strong, Quebec and the Maritimes, and then tailing off across the boreal forests up into Alberta. Green, like us down here in southern Ontario, we only see them on migration. But look, they all go to the Yucatan Peninsula and a little bit of Central America. I just can't even imagine how many millions must be there. The population must be, the density must be amazing. They have a very distinctive pattern on their tail. I don't know if you can see this, but it looks like the tip of the tail was dipped in black ink. So like the previous two, the American redstart and hooded warbler, they use their distinct tail, flash it out, spook the insects jumping into the air, and then they get picked off. Their song sounds like weety, weety, weety-o. Palm warbler. These were named for the palm groves that they were first seen in the winter down in the Caribbean and Hispaniola. But they might spend the winter in the Caribbean, but they actually go further north than most of our warblers. They're right up almost to the tree line, James Bay, Hudson Bay, right almost into the spruce tamarack bogs. If you see a little yellow warbler this time of year and you see its tail bobbing or pumping, it's a palm warbler. It's a really distinctive habit. They're always bobbing their tail, sort of like what a phoebe will do. Next one is the northern Parula. Chris Early, a friend of mine, calls them the sunset warbler for the explosion of color on their upper breast. Most birders, including me, say Parula, but I'm told that the proper pronunciation is Parula. I guess it's tomato. But Parula means little titmouse, and chickadees are in the titmouse family, and these guys forage like a chickadee. You'll often see them hanging upside down, looking for insects on the underside of leaves. Their song is a rising, buzzy trill of insect sounding notes. Here's a shot in the fall. You can see his colors are toned down. I really like this picture because you can actually see his little tongue sticking out. Cape May warbler is the most inappropriately named warbler. They were first identified at Cape May, New Jersey in 1811. Cape May is a famous birding spot because it sort of sticks out into the Atlantic, and the birds see it as the first point of land. But they didn't see another one there for 109 years. So it's forever dubbed the Cape May, but it's not a resident there. In fact, they go pretty far north as well because they're spruce budworm specialists. So their life cycle is really tied to the outbreaks of spruce budworm. I saw one just a couple of days ago in Hamilton. Their song is very high pitched. I can barely hear it. And here's what a male looks like in non-breeding plumage. You can see he's toned down. And then my next shot is of a female. You can see he's still more colorful than the female. She's a little bit more toned down. And I actually took this in South Padre Island, Texas, at a bird center where they had oranges out for the orioles. And the Cape Mays were actually coming and drinking the nectar from the oranges. I found kind of interesting. The bay-breasted is another very handsome warbler. The bay refers to this rich coloring on their flanks and throat and up on their head. This guy's got a dragonfly. And like the Cape May, they go pretty far north, and their life is really tied to the spruce budworm outbreaks. and ones that really change in appearance in the fall, but they do have the black feet, unlike the blackpolls. So he's very, very different looking bird. And here's another one, slightly different again, just showing you, birding in the fall is a lot of fun because there's a lot more birds because there's the babies too, but they're not as flashy and they're more challenging. Okay, black-throated blue. This is the first one that's going to give you a break because they don't change plumage. They're like this gorgeous color all year round. One thing I want to point out, it's not that obvious here, is what we call this white handkerchief. And the reason that's important is because the female looks so different that early ornithologists thought she was a completely different species. But this is, I apologize, not the greatest shot, but she has the white handkerchief as well. It's much more diagnostic if she'd been turned a little bit more to the side. Their song is a rising, almost drunk, slurred sounding, buzzy, I am so lazy. Black-throated green warbler. Lots of these around now. And this is one that birders joke, the name of the bird's longer than the bird itself. Tiny little warbler. Here's a female. You see she's lacking the black throat. And this is so typical of a lot of bird names. The birds are really named for the male, not the female. But we won't get into that can of worms. They have one of the easiest songs to learn. It's very musical, very buzzy. It's sort of z, 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 z. And people say it sounds like trees, 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 I love trees. But once you learn that, it's very distinctive. The Blackburnian, you've already seen this shot. I think just the most spectacular looking little warbler. And you've seen this again, just for a reminder how she's toned down a bit. They're named, funny name, they're named after Anna Blackburn, who was a British naturalist in the late 1700s. Audubon called them the hemlock warbler, which is probably a more appropriate name because that's where they do breed. And for those of you that don't know, John James Audubon was, early 1800s, was an American artist, naturalist, ornithologist. He created essentially the first bird book, The Birds of North America, hand painted every plate in the book. Amazing piece of work. And then the National Audubon Society was named after him, and they're dedicated to conserving birds and their bird habitat. But they apparently are looking into changing their name because it turns out Mr. Audubon was a big time slave owner. So their National Audubon Society is debating a name change. They've been called flame throat, fire throat, or torch bird. And you can see just a brilliant, brilliant throat. One more shot because it's my favorite. Just amazing colors. Yellow rumped warbler. You can see they've got a little crown of yellow. They've got sort of their elbows are yellow, and they've got what we call the butterbutt. Birders call them the butterbutt. These are one of our first warblers to return in the spring and the last to leave in the fall. And there's actually a good reason for that. They are unique amongst the warblers that they can transition over from insects to fruit, and they can digest berries. So that allows them to linger later into the fall and return a bit earlier. And also it means they don't have to migrate so far south. Some of them just go across the Great Lakes and are on the other side of the Great Lakes, which is also another reason they're back early, because they didn't have to travel very far. There's two subspecies. The ones that we have here in the East are called myrtle, and that refers to myrtle berries, which they thrive on. And ours have this white throat patch. Out west, they're called the Audubon subspecies, and that is yellow on them. And here's a female. Very, very bland in comparison from his rich colors here. Second last is the Wilson's warbler. I would have called it the black cap. They're the toupee warbler. The females lack that little toupee. And these guys breed quite far north as well, right up almost to Hudson Bay. And then finally, the star of the show when we start talking migration is the blackpoll warbler. And a reminder, they've got these bright orange yellow feet. And you can see them here. Those of you that might have taken one of my previous talks might remember that pole is an old British word for cap. So I guess this really is the black-capped warbler. And we already talked about the fact that this is a key identification. These feet don't change color in the fall, even though the bird does. You could be forgiven for mistaking it for a chickadee from a distance. But in detail, they're not really like a chickadee. They have a huge breeding range, which I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes, from Alaska right across to Newfoundland. You know, this is a bird of superlatives. They have the highest pitch song of all birds in North America. I cannot hear it. It's above my range. I'm told that it's very loud, if you can hear that frequency, but it's beyond my hearing. Here's a fall shot. The coloring's not great, so you can't really see the orange feet, but I love this photo with just the soft pastel fall colors. I took this here in Ancaster last year. So Kelly, I guess now we've gone through the warblers, and maybe we can get people to let us know what their favorite was. I admit I made kind of a random list. You'll notice I did put my two favorites on here, Blackburnian and Canada, but we left a slot for other. So you don't have to go with the few that I selected. Kelly, is there any way of us finding out what the others are?
No, unfortunately, we just have the others. So if anyone didn't see their favorite, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm seeing Magnolia come up in the chat.
Okay.
Some people are upset that they have to choose one.
Well, yeah, that's me, all of the above, definitely.
Yeah, we'll give people a few more seconds to put that through. Some people are torn between Magnolia, Blackburnian, like the yellow rumped butterbutt, cerulean, that one that's very hard to pronounce,
Prothonotary. I'm liking the fact that my two favorites are the front runners here.
All right, we'll give people just a couple more seconds.
Interesting.
I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and then share the results.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. So, you know, I said the black pole is a bird of superlatives. It's got the highest song. Well, it's got the longest migration of any of our warblers, and it's an epic journey. And we're going to focus on that next, because as Kelly said, this Saturday is World Migratory Bird Day. So we want to convey a bit of information about migration, and the black pole is the superstar of that. So this graphic I took from a great book called What It's Like to Be a Bird by David Allen Sibley. I really recommend it. It's got great illustrations. It's good from kids from 8 to 80. So here's their breeding range in pink. So you can see it's right across North America, and they winter in South America. But the unique thing is they all fly across North America first. So the ones in Alaska don't head straight down to South America. They all make a cross North America journey, basically to Nova Scotia down to Cape May, New Jersey. And then from there, they fatten up, and then they jump off. One night they get brave and they head out over the Atlantic, and they fly 2,500 miles nonstop in about 72 hours. Now you got to think, these are little tiny birds that cannot land on the water. If they hit a storm, sometimes they take refuge in a boat. They get lucky and there might be a boat, they land on a boat. Some of them will land on an island in the Caribbean, maybe Cuba or somewhere, and have a little beach holiday for a day or two to recover, and then they carry on. But this is an epic journey. And this is all done by a bird that weighs 12 or 13 grams. And you know, that's like a weight of 2 nickels and maybe a dime. And I should mention, these aren't my pictures now. I did not take these. So how do they do it? Well, before they migrate, when they get to the East Coast there, they fatten up. They have special hormones and steroids and enzymes that allow them to convert insects into body fat really rapidly, to the point where they can double their weight in 3 or 4 days. So they want to be maybe up around 25 grams before they set off on that journey. And they also ramp up their hemoglobin and oxygen-rich red blood cells. Think about it. They fly at about 2 miles up, 12,000 feet. So the air is pretty thin. It's cold. They're out over the Atlantic Ocean, and starting off in the North Atlantic Ocean. So they have to be able to metabolize. So they do a lot of preparation. So once they're fattened up, they go airborne and there's no turning back. And they have no idea what they're flying into. They could fly into a hurricane because, hurricane season is right when birds are migrating. And, so a lot of them don't make it. But for the lucky ones that do, after those 3 days, they've averaged about 650 miles a day at speeds of 25 to 30 miles per hour. And they're going to lose 50% of their weight. They're going to lose all that weight they gained and usually a little bit more. And, if this was a car burning fat instead of gas, the car is getting about 750 miles to the gallon, or a human running a 4-minute mile for something like 80 hours. It's staggering what this little guy is doing. And that's why for migration, I wanted to really feature the Blackpoll. It's incredible. So like we discussed, World Day's coming up. I want to talk just a couple more little feats of migration by other birds, and then discuss how did I know all that detail about their journey, and then the whys, the whats, the hows of migration, some of the hazards, and then the lights out, which is the theme of this Saturday. So this is from the British Trust of Ornithology. There's a lot of information on it. I'm not going to go through it all, but I'll just point out 3 stars here. The bar-tailed godwit is a bird that commutes annually between New Zealand and Alaska. It's a 7,000-mile flight, and it does it nonstop in 8 days. It's just incredible. The bar-headed goose, they migrate over the Himalayas, 5.5 miles up. I mean, how do they not freeze to death, and where do they get the oxygen up there? And then lastly, the all-time winner in the long-distance sweepstakes is the Arctic tern. They experience summer at both poles. They're up in the Arctic for our summer and then go down to the Antarctic for their summer. So it's a 50,000 mile a year round trip. So you get an Arctic tern that lives 6-7 years. He's flown further than the moon. It's incredible. So, okay, and again, so this is not my picture, and you might have noticed this on some of the previous pictures. This is a Blackpoll warbler, and we'll get to this in a second. So how do we know these details about migration? Historically, the only tool was banding. In England, the UK, they call it ringing, but it's the same thing. So you capture the bird, you put a little ring with the identification marks, date and all that around its leg. The only problem with that is you have to get lucky and recapture that same bird. And my understanding is the success rate is like 1.3%. And then even so, when you catch them, all you know is that on this date he was at point A, and on this date he was at point B. You have no idea how he got in between the two, how long, what he was doing. So there are satellite tags that can be strapped on their back that are bigger than this. And they actually have transmitters that will give you real-time tracking to a satellite, but their minimum size to have a transmitter is 3.5 grams. And you cannot go and strap a 3.5 gram transmitter on a 12-gram bird. You're going to kill it. So what they've come up with is these geolocators. They only weigh about 0.5 gram, and that's what you're seeing on this Blackpoll. And there's no transmitter, but there's a clock and a sensor which measures the ambient light levels. So from that, scientists can calculate the latitude and longitude. So they actually know, and the dates, so they can actually know the pattern or the route that the bird took. But because there's no transmitter, you still have to recapture that bird to get the data. But it's a lot better than the data just from banding. So there's always new progress. There's even new stuff since this, but right now the latest that they're using are nanotags. And these use very high frequency radio transmitters. They're so tiny, they're told they can be strapped onto a dragonfly. And this data can then be collected in real time. So there's a network of receiving towers across North America called MODIS, which word meaning movement or motion. There's about 325 of them. So you can actually just follow this guy. It's like having a GPS on him. You know exactly where he is at all times. And I'm very proud as a Canadian to say that this is a Canadian initiative by our federal agency, Birds Canada, based out of Long Point, Port Rowan, down just south of here in Lake Erie. And just as an aside, this has got nothing to do with MODIS, but weather radar can actually also be used to track moving birds. So they figure out how to strip out these yellows and greens are precipitation. But these blue blobs down here coming up off the Gulf of Mexico, these are huge flocks of birds migrating. So about 40% of all the birds in the world migrate. There's somewhere between 10 and 11,000 species of birds in the world. About 40% of them migrate. In North America, we only have about 650 species. Of those, 350 are long distance migrants. And that probably says something about our climate in North America. Some of them are just short distance migrants. And the two examples I'll give are dark-eyed juncos, you know, my harbinger of winter coming. You know, they've come from the boreal forests in Northern Ontario and they spend the winter in my backyard here. Snow buntings come from Greenland and Baffin Island and the high Arctic, and they're swirling around the farm fields of Southern Ontario. So they never left Canada. So those are considered short distant migrants. But so, I mean, why undergo these hazardous journeys? It's dangerous. It requires a lot of energy. You've got to adapt to a lot of things that you didn't really evolve for. Obviously, one of the big things for warblers is their food supply. They're insect eaters. When winter comes, the insects are gone. So they have to go south for their food. And just as a point of interest, warblers this time of year and in the fall, pay attention to chickadees, because the warblers will cohort with the chickadees and they'll follow them around and take advantage of their local knowledge of what's safe, you know, where they might find some good food. But you know, it begs the question then, well, why not just stay down south? Why come up here if you get food year round down in the tropics? Why would you want to come up and live in Kapuskasing or, you know, way up north in James Bay? Well, the answer in one word: protein. There's biggest annual explosion of protein happens every spring in the Northern Hemisphere, and in terms of bugs, insects hatching. And you combine all of that free food with our greater lengths of day, and the birds that migrate up here can raise more young, 4 to 6 on average, than their relatives that stayed down in Brazil with only 2 or 3. And here's a golden wing warbler with a caterpillar. I took this up in Algoma last year. I wish I could have seen him feeding his babies, but it was going whack into a swampy area. So, you know, sort of in summary, migrants are able to nest in areas with reduced competition and a ton of free food. So they're basically going a long way for cheap food and lodging. You know, the deal's worth it. And, you know, Kelly had asked me, where do they rest along the way? Well, they find a roost with an inconspicuous place where predators can't catch them. They'll hide in a tree. A lot of people think birds have an automatic perching mechanism with a death grip on the branch. It's not true. Their toes are just loosely draped over the branch. They shift their body weight a bit forward and they just balance themselves. But their trick is they sleep with half a brain at a time. They sleep with one eye open. So they're not going to fall off. You know, they rest half the brain and then they switch over. So I think I wrote down 73% of the audience thought there are birds. Well, I like to think they are too, but are they really ours if they only spend 4 months of the year here? And then basically they're here in May and gone by September, or in September. They're spending 8 months away from here. So what's happened is when the last glaciers retreated about 10,000 years ago, the birds down in the tropics would expand their range up to the toe of the glacier, but then winter would come and they'd retreat. And then the next year, the glaciers might be 20, 30, 40 miles further north. And over 10,000 years, we now have warblers going right up to James Bay. And it paid off because they were getting all this food, but the migration just increased as they followed the glaciers north. And now genetics and DNA have shown that a lot of our very colorful birds like tanagers, warblers, orioles have evolved from tropical forms, tropical species. So I hate to say it, but they really are tropical visitors that bless us with their presence for the summer. So what triggers all this migration? Decision's really complex. It's not straightforward, and I don't pretend to understand it all. The change in the day length triggers hormones, which leads to body changes that increases their urge to migrate. Historically, people that have kept cage birds, if the cage bird was a migratory species, they would notice in the spring and fall that bird would get really fidgety. It would be much more active at night because it wants to get going at night. And they might even keep fluttering to one side of the cage, the north side or the south side, depending on the season. So there's something very innate there, just very hardwired. But and the other triggers, food supplies, like we talked about with the warblers, and temperature. A question I often get asked is about, you're feeding the birds in the fall, you're holding them back, they're not going to migrate, you're going to keep them too late, then they're going to die. This is false. Birds are very happy to desert your feeders when it's time to go. They know better. And in fact, even birds at your feeder at any time of the year, they never take more than about 50% of their diet. You are not providing 100% of their diet. They go out and get natural stuff in the forest. So our insect-eating birds typically leave in late August to mid-September. The birds that the omnivores that eat a more balanced diet of fruit, seeds, and insects, for example, sparrows, they can stay well into November. So they have the luxury of waiting for really optimum conditions. Maybe they wait for fair skies, a nice strong north wind to push them south. Whereas our warblers, once the food's gone, they got to get going, or they're going to starve. So you could argue that sparrows and these omnivores actually have a slightly less dangerous migration, because they can be a bit more choosy about when they initiate it. And then the yellow rumps, I talked about the fact that they're ones that can switch. They can go from being insect eating to omnivores. And so they can migrate like the omnivores, and that's why they can hang on later, because they can eat berries. So going north, when the birds are going north, they're fighting two competing, they've got one goal, but there's two competing things that have to jive. They all want to be the males go first. They all want to be the first up there because they want to get the prime territory. They want to stake a claim in the best land and then get the best female and raise big, healthy family of babies. But if they're too aggressive and they move too fast north, they might end up in Thunder Bay this spring in a snowbank and freeze or starve. And in fact, climate change is going to become an issue more and more with some of these long distance migrants. Because you think of a warbler sitting in Brazil, he's leaving in the spring just based on his hard wiring. So he's not leaving any earlier. Meanwhile, Northern Ontario is getting warmer like a month earlier. And the day's going to come where the insects have all hatched out and died off. By the time the warblers come up, they're going to be out of sync with their food supply. So this is one of the challenges of migration, especially long distance migrants. Getting a mismatch between their food sources at each end of the trip, because they have no idea. It is a mystery, and like I say, I don't understand how they do it. There's a term called high site fidelity, and this is birds that go thousands of miles south, come back thousands of miles north, and literally back to the same tree or the same block, the same little patch of forest. How do they do that? And there are species of birds that the parents take off south and leave the kids, and the kids come south a month later on their own. And somehow those kids make the journey the first time on their own. They go to the right place and they come back to where they were born. So there is a bit of a mystery there. So some of it is innate and genetic, and that's the part that's just hardwired, and I don't pretend to know how it works. They do use things like social cues. For example, the famous V shape of migrating geese, follow the leader. They use a lot of visual cues. They follow coastlines, landmarks, they track the sun and the movement of the stars. They even use invisible cues like smell, and they can hear very low frequencies. But the coolest thing is that most recent discovery is that birds have some kind of almost like magnetite crystals, in their eyes, and it allows them to see the Earth's magnetic field. And they can even see the slope of the Earth's magnetic field. And as a geologist, we all know that the Earth's magnetic field at the equator is flat and at the poles it's vertical. And so they can see the angle of that. So that gives them a sense of their latitude, how far north or south they are. And they see polarized light, so they get a clue to where the sun is, whether they can even see the sun or not. So basically, it looks like birds have some kind of GPS compass out in front of them, right through their eyes, that they're seeing that we just can't comprehend. But there's so many hazards along the way. When they land exhausted after flying all night, they don't know if there's going to be an adequate supply of food. They don't know if they're flying into a hurricane. They may be landing in an area with predators that they haven't evolved to be wary of. Cats. So can you imagine making this journey successfully, and then you come into Hamilton and you fly into a building that's all reflective glass, or a building that's all lit up at night? And this is where Kelly and I come in with our bird-friendly team. Each year in Canada, about 25 million migrating birds die by colliding with buildings. In the States, it's up to closer to maybe up to almost 1 billion. The focus of this year's World Migratory Day is on the impact of light, so light pollution. And why is that important? Because 2/3 of our songbirds migrate at night. And why do they migrate at night? Well, there's less raptors. There's less threats. The air is cooler. The air is calmer. And cooler air is important because they're not going to lose so much water panting and breathing hard. So it's just an easier flight at night. But the artificial light drowns out the stars and makes it hard to navigate. And if there's a lot of light pollution, especially on a foggy, rainy night, they get down low, they'll fly low, and then they get lulled into buildings. A classic example is New York City's 9/11 tribute of lights. They put up these twin beams of lights. And in 2010, some ornithologists thought they should monitor this. And within 20 minutes of those beams being turned on, 16,000 birds were crammed in within a half-kilometer radius of those beams. And here's an actual picture. I mean, they look like moths at a light. And the birds, once they get trapped in I use the term trapped literally, because it's like they don't want to get out of it, don't want to leave. They circle and circle, and they call until they're exhausted. And eventually they drop down and into a building, or they get caught by a cat because they haven't got the energy to flee. So this is a screenshot of the homepage for an organization called FLAP. And this is a very important organization to be aware of. It's an acronym for Fatal Light Awareness Program. It's a Canadian charity. It started in Toronto, I think in 1993. It was the first in the world to raise the awareness of this problem of lights on buildings interfering with birds, particularly during migration. So here's a poster for this Saturday. And you notice they've got 11 birds they chose as ambassadors. 2 are warblers, a Wilson's warbler, and here's a magnolia. So the Audubon Society picked up on this and started to run with it. And in 1999, they established the first ever Lights Out program in Chicago, basically mandating tower lights and building lights out for a week or 2 in peak migration time in the spring and fall. And then that's expanded to now there's something like 44 cities across North America that have this. That includes 3 of the biggest cities in North America: Chicago, Toronto, New York. So what they say is dim the lights for the birds at night. And as we mentioned, our goal, Kelly and I and Burlington Green, was to get Burlington and Hamilton certified by Nature Canada as bird friendly by World Migratory Bird Day. And we succeeded. We're pretty proud of that. Both cities were certified bird friendly, but we can't rest on our laurels. There's a lot more to do. Both cities, for example, need a Lights Out program. If Toronto and Chicago and New York can have one, surely little towns in comparison, like Hamilton and Burlington, could mandate that. There has to be a will. Here's some data from FLAP Canada. During migration, they have volunteers that go around the streets of Toronto picking up dead birds. And they make very careful maps under which building they were found, and they record the species. And these are the top 20 window colliders, fatalities. And I highlighted that 7 of the top 20 are my beloved warblers. So okay, that's kind of more, but let's get into the fun side of migration now. And that's what's happening right now as we speak is birding during spring migration. Best time of the year to be a birder. Early birds started arriving late April. We're right at the peak right now, typically May 5th to 10th. It's later this year because we've had nothing but winds from the north for the last week. The winds just swung around basically last night. Cornell lab estimated that last night 400 million birds were on the move across North America in the dark while you were sleeping. And as a birder, it's like Santa came every morning, because you go to your local patch and there's all these birds, and you go the next day, those birds are gone, maybe gone, and have moved on, but there's a whole new flock of birds, different species. And this just happens day after day after day. Oh, sorry, Kelly, I forgot to take that out. I'll skip right by that. Favorite warbler. So just to show you how many birds are actually on the move. Right now, there's about 2.6 billion birds overall coming into Canada. Like literally this week, it's all happening, late April to mid-May. In the fall, with the benefit of all the babies, there's about 4 billion going south. So this is why migration is so exciting for birders. So where do you want to go birding? You want migrant traps, and migrant traps are sort of the first point of land jutting out into the water on the Great Lakes, and forest covered, so it's like a nice little oasis. And so, for example, in spring migration, like now, birds coming up that hit Lake Erie, they see Long Point, they see Rondo, they see Point Pelee. And lo and behold, those are like 3 of the top birding spots in North America. So the birds drop there and recover. If you look at Lake Ontario, it doesn't have equivalent shortcuts. So a lot of the birds, if they hit Lake Ontario or even this east end of Lake Erie, they'll follow the coastline around and then take off again. So what that means for us birders living right here, not only do we get the birds that have used the Niagara Peninsula as an isthmus, we get ones that have crossed over and are coming up. So we get a ton of birds here. And Kelly's going to be sending a handout. So if you're wondering about this map, it will be included. You'll get this map and this one in detail. So because it's in the handout, I won't dwell on it, but there's all kinds of good urban migrant traps from Toronto all the way around to east of Hamilton down towards St. Catharines. And they're usually little woodlots right on the coastline. The birds see those and they get really concentrated in there, and they'll recover from their migration. My last shameless promotion, as Kelly mentioned in the introduction, I have Lyme disease. I discovered birding was just the best thing for me, gets my mind off my aching body. I initially wrote this book for myself that was kind of cathartic. On a whim, I submitted it to some publishers, and I'm still in shock that Hancock House picked it up. It's now available on their website for pre-ordering, and it still shows publication in spring. So I haven't talked to them for a few weeks, but it should be coming out sometime in the next month, I would hope. But you can certainly pre-order it now, and there's this isn't in the handout, but hancockhouse.com. So let's thank our host, Burlington Green, and in particular, Kelly. These guys are doing incredible work, great work, and I ask you to donate to them. Every penny counts, and they spend it very wisely. So burlingtongreen.org, you can make a donation. So that's it. I thank you all for your attention and attending, and buckle up and enjoy this fun ride because it's still going on. You can select your seat here. And one last thing, Kelly Sue O'Connor is another member of our Bird Friendly team. And she composed and performed a really fun little song, Shout, Shout, Turn the Lights Out. It's only about 2 minutes long. It's on YouTube, and the web URL for that is in the handout that Kelly will send you. It's really worth watching. And I'm on Twitter. Feel free to follow me at the Birder Bob. I try to post birds daily, except when I'm away off somewhere without any internet connection. And if we run out of time for your questions, don't hesitate, or if you think of something new to ask me tomorrow, just email me here at my email address. I'd be very happy to try to help you. So I think that's it, Kelly. That's the last slide. I'll stop sharing. There we go.
Great. Thank you so much, Bob, for that amazing talk. We learned lots about warblers and lots about migration, so that was fantastic. I've been keeping an eye on the chat, and it looks like we've got a quiet group tonight. I'll maybe just pose one question that kind of came to mind, and I know you talked about some of the challenges that birds face during migration. Is there any type of statistic on how many birds successfully migrate versus ones that maybe don't make it in the process? Is there anything like that that you're aware of?
You know, not that I'm aware of. Doesn't mean it's not out there, Kelly. Sorry, I don't know. It's a hazardous journey. But you know, it's amazing because this morning I saw a blue-winged warbler, and it's very unique because his wings, the wing bars are not white; they're yellow. He's a hybrid. He's one of these hybrids between a golden wing and a blue wing. He's got some genetic mixing. That same bird was there last summer. So like, I know that bird has had a successful journey down, you know, just way south, Central America, South America, and he's back in Merrick Orchard in the Dundas Valley. You know, so so there's one that made it, but you know, overall in the population, I really don't know what percentage don't make it. I mean, there's so many different hazards, from, you know, buildings to cats to weather, you know, especially going across the North Atlantic or South Atlantic. They fly into hurricanes in September, and, you know, it can be very dangerous.
Sure. I did see one question come through in the Q&A, is just from Ali. What is the best bird seed for backyard birders to put out?
Most people really like black oil sunflower seeds, because almost every bird likes that. So sunflower seeds, the black oil.
Good to know.
They do leave the shell on the ground, though. I don't personally like them because the shell kills the grass underneath. I buy chipped ones, so you're just getting the seed without the shell. They're more expensive, but then the birds eat 100%. You know, if you're paying by the weight, maybe it's not more expensive, because, you know, they waste a lot on the shells. I think I saw a question from Dave concerning best time for warbling.
Yes, sorry, my internet's cutting out a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, best time to see warblers.
Yeah, definitely in the morning. I mean, early morning, especially, you know, if the birds have just landed, if they've just migrated in overnight and they land at dawn, or maybe an hour after dawn, they're exhausted, they're down low and they're foraging. The last week or so, when it's been so cold in the morning, I found I was going out too early, because it was so cold that the insects aren't moving yet. And if the insects aren't moving, then the warblers aren't moving. But like tomorrow, it's going to be fantastic at 6 a.m. You know, warm southerly winds, the birds will be very busy. So early morning. I see a question there about, oh, sorry, Kelly, you go ahead.
Sorry, my internet's cutting out a little bit. I can't tell if you finished. Oh, no, I was just going to say that my internet's cutting out a little bit, so it's a little choppy. So I wasn't sure if you'd finished or we're still answering.
Okay. I saw a question there about the time. Spring migration, you know, I would think the light should be out from, say, April 20th to May 15th or May 20th. So about a month. And fall migration is not quite as frenetic. In the spring, it's more of a mad dash. Everybody's going north to get the best territory. It's like a gold rush. You know, all the prospectors want to get up there first and get the best claim. In the fall, I find migration can be a bit more laid back. And they'll take their time and work their way south, and not such a big rush. So, you know, shorebirds actually start migrating in late July. But I would say lights out, you know, sometime in September, late August to late September.
And there was another question here while we're kind of talking about Lights Out. Is the Lights Out campaign for tall buildings or for all places?
I think primarily tall buildings, but statistically, most bird collisions are down low. They're not on tall buildings. It's actually down low. So, you know, I think the lights should be turned off right down in all buildings.
Great. And then one final question I just see here in the Q&A is, and you know, if you need to get back with an answer on this one, that's okay. This is from Katharina, who asked, what percentage of songbirds are affected by the avian flu in Canada? Do you know anything about that?
I have no idea. I read that something like 40 species of birds have been affected so far. But I don't know if that's just 40 songbirds species or if that includes all the waterfowl. So I don't think it's very prevalent yet in songbirds, but it could certainly become so.
Okay.
There's a really good wildlife refuge called Hobbitstee, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, in Jarvis, south of here. And if you look up their website, she probably has a lot of information. Chantal, who's on our team.
Yes, that's great. So I think that's all the questions we've had come through, and we're kind of hitting our time for the end of our amazing bird talk. So I want to give my sincerest thanks to you, Bob, for joining us again and sharing your passion for birds and warblers with us. You know, it's such a treat to hear you talk so passionately about birds, but your photos are incredible, and you always give really informative and thoughtful insights about what people can do to support and protect birds. And that's, you know, such an important part of you know, the hobby and joy of birding. So, you know, thank you so much for joining again.
Thank you.
And just
Thank
a few final things. Thank you. Just a few final things before we wrap up. As we've talked about, World Migratory Bird Day is May 14th. So we're just generally asking you to turn off any non-essential lights on May 14th for Migratory Bird Day. And if you can do it throughout the month of May to help protect migrating birds, that's even better.
Excellent.
And our Bird Friendly Hamilton Burlington team is giving away some free feather friendly bird collision deterrent markers. And these are available to nonprofits, small businesses, houses of worship, and the like that are located in Burlington and Hamilton. So applications are being accepted until June 15th. And I'll include a link to that as well in the follow-up email. And at Burlington Green, we offer a variety of awareness, advocacy, and action opportunities for people just like you to make an impact for the planet locally. This is just a sampling of some of the upcoming events and opportunities we have over the next couple of weeks. And I'll include a link to those in the follow-up email as well. If you enjoyed tonight's event and you'd like to hear about more that we have going on, be sure to sign up for our monthly newsletter. And then just lastly, when you exit tonight, you should get directed in your browser to a post-event survey. Your feedback is so important to us and helps us improve your experience for future events. It only takes a minute. We'd appreciate if you could take that survey. And Burlington Green is a charity, and donations go directly to protect local nature and help the planet locally together with the community. If you can give today at the link in the chat that my colleague Ali is going to drop in there, it is much appreciated and will make a big difference for the future. So thank you. And lastly, today's event was part of our Nature Friendly Burlington program. So thank you to the Burlington Foundation for making that program and tonight's event possible. So thank you again to Bob for joining us. That was absolutely fantastic. We can't wait to do the next one. And thank you to everyone for taking time from your night to come and join us. So that's all we've got today. And thank you so much for joining. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kelly.